Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 20th of October 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson, and we're going to be joined by live video link with Guy Taylor. Guy, you're there in the Hereford area, and I believe you've said there are no clouds.
No clouds in the sky. Very bright, beautiful day.
Okay, well that's pretty good. Reports across the rest of the country, a little bit variable. We've got Manchester teaming up with Holland today. This is obviously part of the European cooperation programme, and they're sharing clouds. But Pembrokeshire, Norfolk, Plymouth, sunny, and Hereford, as you've said, pretty good as well.
Yeah.
If only the situation in UK was so sunny. What is your update? You've been busy in the courts. You've got a report on the Boddenham situation, which is essentially about the stealing of property. Have you got some good news for us today?
Yeah, I've got some very good news, Brian. I've actually, at long last, got a date for a trial in the Crown Court. Of course, I went through all the magistrates' courts, etc., to be able to get there. But there's a 2-day trial being set for Hereford Crown Court on December the 10th and 11th. There's plenty of room in the Crown Court, so hopefully there'll be plenty of support, and we'll put the thing right. I've been charged, I was charged originally under the Legal Aid and Sentencing Act 2012, which is trespass on my own property, section 144 of that, which is a fairly new offence, as it were. I say offence lightly. But of course, it's a summary-only offence, so the only way I could get this thing heard was by taking it all the way into the Crown Court, which is where we're going to be on the 10th and the 11th. Of course, the situation is that, really and truthfully, all of it's around trespass, and trespass is my intent to trespass. In law, they call it my mens rea. Well, my only mens rea was if the banks are going to rob me and my family of all our properties and all our belongings, then my only mens rea was to get them into a criminal court of record, i.e. the Crown Court, and that's going to be achieved on the 10th and the 11th, so we can expose all of the civil wrongdoing that's gone on inside these fake civil courts in the Crown Court, in front of the public, and for and on the record.
Will that be in front of a jury, Guy?
No, unfortunately, they won't give me that facility because it's a summary-only offence. But because we've appealed it from the Magistrates' Court, so it's an absolute. The Magistrates' Court was a dress rehearsal for what's going to go on in the Crown, and what's going to go on in the Crown apparently is there's going to be a single judge, Judge Hooper, I've been informed, and 2 magistrates with him. That's going to be. But in essence, this is what I wanted all along. My only intent in all this, from going back up to Boddenham, was to get this whole situation exposed. And so my intent would have been realised on that day by getting it actually in a public court with and heard for on the record.
Right. Guy, we are receiving more and more reports from people around the country, essentially of property being stolen. Sometimes this is to do with mortgage fraud, but we're now also starting to get some pretty deeply disturbing reports coming in of property being taken from elderly people after they get involved with the National Health Service. So we're receiving, we'll say stories at this point, stories that people who were basically elderly but in quite good health, they go into the NHS system for some reason, they then seem to go downhill, they are then either put aside into nursing homes or residential care homes, and then along comes social services, and families are more or less told, well, we've got to sell the property in order to pay for the future care of your elderly relative. Now, what some individuals are suggesting to us is that the elderly relative then dies in fairly short order. So we've got some very, very sinister stuff unfolding here, but all of it linking back to people making immense amount of money over the manipulation of property. Have you also had other people talking to you about theft of property?
We're getting it on a daily basis, Brian. And I promise you, there's no less than 3 or 4 people are contacting me on a daily basis on this exact subject. I mean, and these people are going to the police, and the police are ignoring them. And basically, I think the police have been brainwashed by criminals, and the criminals being the judiciary to a certain extent in this. We're even getting information that when people are going under the freedom of information and going to the site, what do they know? They're finding out that judges who are supposed to be a judge in their case at the High Court, upon examination, aren't ticketed to have any authority in the matter. So we've got people who aren't judges dealing with all this. And again, this is all manufactured consent. With the old people, I mean, this is going on everywhere. Especially down in Wales, I've had information for a long period of time that people are getting charges put on their property that they don't realise are on their property, and of course, then when they die, that the properties are getting taken off them, and this is going on. It's endemic, and everywhere we're getting is seizure of assets all over the place, and as I've said before, we're in the Wild West, and it's becoming more obvious every day.
Guy, thank you for that. At the end of the day, the trail always leads back to the bank. Where does ownership of these properties go? It goes to the bank. And I believe you discovered something fairly recently, which I found astonishing. I think our viewers and listeners will, but this is a little department in one of the very large banks.
Yeah, last week, because I've got this case going on in the Crown Court now, I'm able to drag the civil court procedures, kicking and screaming, into the criminal court. So the bank manager, who I've never been able to get into court, the one who claims I took a loan out that I never took out from Barclays, of course, I've been looking to get hold of him, to subpoena him for this criminal trial. And so I would spend a day going through the switchboard and talking to getting put through to various numbers where they were just sending me in circles, and I couldn't get through to any of them. But eventually, there was a helpful guy on the one switchboard, and he put me through to a department which pretty much freaked me out when he put me through. And when I rang the number, it was Barclay's police liaison department. And when I started talking to the lady, she sounded very much like possibly a retired policewoman or a former policewoman. She got very angry when she realised I wasn't a solicitor or a police officer, and was very concerned how I had got through to the Barclays police liaison department. I didn't want to get the guy in trouble. I just said it would have been someone from a switchboard. I don't know whether or not he's going to get in trouble for it, if they could find out who he was. But yeah, so the bank have actually got a police liaison department,
right,
for any crimes.
And then we have to start asking some very basic questions, which is why are they there? How does liaison with the police work? Does that mean that the banks get an advance warning when crime has been committed and people are going to come looking at the banks? I mean, this is separation of powers, just disappears out the window here, doesn't it?
Well, it's just gone. And I mean, when they set up this company called Action Fraud, Action Fraud are actually City of London police group, which is, so anyone who reports a fraud in this country goes through the City of London Police, or a department of it, or a company called Action Fraud. So, I mean, the whole thing is becoming so obviously corrupt that I don't know where people are going to go. I really don't with all this.
Well, I think probably quite a few people are going to go on the streets when they actually realise just how widespread the corruption is in the system. But it could only be that widespread if it was being condoned, if it was being coordinated, in fact, by the very people who should be there to protect us. So we're certainly looking at MPs. We're, of course, looking at judges. We must be looking at senior police officers. But it looks as if all of these agencies have been infiltrated. I'm not going to say they're all bad, because I don't believe that, but the criminal element is now firmly entrenched in government, in the judiciary, in the police, and of course within the banking system, a cartel operating. seems to me that's what we need to expose fully to the wider public to get the right result.
I mean, if we see strategic partnership anywhere, then we should be asking questions. Because when we see strategic partnership, we're looking at conflict of interest straight away. And you'll see that the police are in strategic partnerships with the council. And, again, all work from many years ago to do with common purpose, set the agenda that we can see now in motion. I mean, there are strategic partnerships in all these bodies, and then they're operating under MAPA, which is this multi-agency thing. So we're finding, Brian, that anyone who's challenging the system in any way, shape or form is becoming labelled with a free man on the land handle. Now, this might be someone who's just started to question whether their bill is right on something. And of course, once this label flags up, they're being treated completely discriminatory. There's discrimination against them straight away. And we're getting this from everywhere. So, I mean, anyone who's reporting crimes to the police must be noticing a change of the police's position, because the police are not engaging in conversation with people that come up labelled as being a free man on the land. And you may not be a free man on the land. You may know nothing about that. You've just asked questions about your paying your council tax, or why, is my money going to fund causes of war abroad or whatever. But whatever you're asking, whatever questions you're asking, you're getting this label. And, and when the public want to address this and notify the police that they want to address it, like a few weeks ago when I supported Mickey Summers in Nottingham and a group of people, we marched to the police station all the way through Nottingham city centre. And of course, as we've previously noticed, when we get to the police station, they close it. And they only closed it for that march. An hour after the march, it was reopened. So it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. I've been reporting crimes to the police now on numerous occasions. We're talking every week, and they won't get back to me. They won't. But yet the very solicitors who are supposed to be engaging in litigation in these issues, if I contact them by letter, they send the police around with a notice saying that I'm harassing them, even though I sent the notice, completely legitimate notice to them through the postal service. So we're dealing in tyrannical times, but I mean, the public are waking up in vast numbers, and the amount of traffic that we're getting of people needing redress is, well, amazing. I mean, the same must be going on with you.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that if the police simply refuse to engage with people and they introduce a blanket label, that is a sign that they're frightened. They can't actually deal with the information and the queries coming in. Of course, the courts have done this over many years by branding people vexatious, which actually denies that person a route to any form of justice. So I think this must be a fear factor coming in. And why would you close a police station? Well, there can only be one reason. They're getting very worried. They were scared enough to close those gates. So I think it's a balance. The pressure needs to be continued, certainly on the police, who should be bringing corrupt judges to book. Well, of course, it should be the police themselves. They are only going to do that if the public support is there. So we mustn't alienate all policemen and women. But we can keep the pressure on them and we can educate them. Well, on the subject of police, Mike has just found out an interesting little fact to do with the abuse of children inquiries.
The BBC, I should switch my microphone on. BBC reporting here that two of the Metropolitan Police CSA investigations are to be merged into one team. This is Operation Midland and Operation Fairbank. And apparently these two investigations have identified people and locations in common, according to the BBC. So therefore, they say that it's operationally important to have the same officer in charge. So Operation Midland is inquiring into claims of child abuse by establishment figures. Operation Fairbank is a wider child abuse inquiry. So despite all the rhetoric in the media about how various VIPs are innocent, it seems that there are common names in not only the specifically establishment figure inquiry, but the wider inquiry as well. But the fact that these two inquiries, Brian, I'm just wondering what your view is on this, but the fact that these two inquiries are being sort of merged under one officer in charge surely must make it easier for a cover-up, if that is what's on the agenda here.
Well, that's certainly my feeling, is that I believe that some pretty serious information has come to the fore to do with the Goddard inquiry. We've got other information coming through. We know that Met police officers are now prepared to step forward and say that they were involved in child abuse investigations going back over the years that were then closed down by senior politicians, obviously acting on pressure from politicians and VIP establishment figures. So as this information comes in, it gets more and more dangerous. You've got to be able to keep tabs on it. And of course, if you have several police units investigating, yes, they may trip on each other's toes, they may drift across boundaries. But of course, what it does give you is 3 opportunities to get the truth. You bring it under one unified command. And of course, as soon as the dangerous information has come in, it gets much easier to close it down.
I just wanted to add one more thing, Brian, and that is on a slightly different aspect of this, because tomorrow is a pretty big day in the House of Commons. Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector Paul Settle, Tom Watson MP and Alison Saunders from the Crown Prosecution Service are going to be in front of the Commons Home Affairs Committee. So that's going to be an interesting discussion, I suspect, and we'll be watching that with interest.
Well, that's true, Mike. A little bit later in our news today, we'll be mentioning some of these committees and who stands in there. Guy, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, if I could. I mean, we're talking about consolidation. That's what they're doing, and it's the last refuge of the scoundrel, really. And we got to look at it as a form of retreat, because, you know, as you said, if there was 3 separate inquiries, then we'd have 3 different groups of people, you know, engaging in it. And as it is, you know, they're retreating, they're going backwards and consolidating their position. And so, you know, we've got to look at these things from both sides. I mean, as you rightly said earlier, it looks like the whole situation is going in reverse. They are retreating, and we can see that. That's why they're being so blatant about these things. There can be no other way for them to nothing else for them to do but retreat. The spotlight's fully on them.
And we need to keep that spotlight on them. Well, let's just have a look at this business over the data loss from Goddard's CSA inquiry. I've got to say I was pretty suspicious about this when it started. Here's the lovely lady. Remember, this is the 64th rate judge that is suddenly parachuted in because we can trust her. We know nothing about her, but apparently we're all to trust her when she runs this inquiry. She hasn't yet fully set up the inquiry. But what we do know is that her staff are Home Office staff, and of course the wall of protection around her is being run by NSPCC. But we get in the judge at £500,000 a year, and then, quick as a flash, the CSA inquiry said its change of website address meant information was instantly and permanently deleted before it reached the engagement team. Now, what's interesting is a number of people have said something is wrong here, this is not possible. And we were sent this one, so I chose it, change.org, but it says IT online expert denounces the inquiry data loss explanation as ridiculous. And this is Mr. Phil Mayer, an IT and web developer of police systems for 25 years. He spoke to the White Flowers organisation and he said, I find it inconceivable that any such data could be deleted instantly and permanently. And he says, if, however, they did claim the data reached its intended target, the database or the email system, then it would require both incredible naivety and incompetence during setup or a highly sophisticated and deliberate set of actions to destroy all trace of the data in such a thorough and irretrievable way. This is such a ridiculous story that no one could possibly believe it. Now, this is, I think, very, very powerful comment. We've been doing something pretty simple. We've been asking the inquiry who ran those IT systems. We believe that they are being run by the Home Office. Therefore, this is the actions of the Home Office to destroy data. But it could be that NSPCC is running these systems, or it could be some other contractor. But at the moment, the Goddard inquiry will not answer the UK column's question over who was directly responsible for those systems. Guy, if you like, just a quick comment on that, and then we'll move on through the news.
More convenient than a Tesco Express, Brian.
Thank you very much. Well, child abuse in UK. The Daily Mail says 3 million children, or 3 million adults now could be affected. We don't know where they got those statistics from, but that's an enormous figure. Who is concerned about this? Well, it appears not the royal family, because the big headline here is that Prince William, who's now been given a D at the end of his name by the Daily Mail, he's been spending public money very wisely by meeting a 7'6" Chinese basketball star. So good to see the royal family getting into the serious aspects of life. And what's he been saying? Well, he says that basically the Chinese have got to stop hunting animals for their body parts. He says only we, the consumers, can put the wildlife traffickers out of business. The desire to possess animal trophies or ornaments made from ivory has been felt on every continent for centuries. So we're just going to say at the bottom, no worries for human body parts being taken in China. These people are sickening. I'm going to leave it there. Mike, over to you and the police.
Yes. So yesterday we mentioned, or at least we illustrated, the coming privatisation of the police with this company positioning itself to become the new police. And we showed how well equipped they were and so on. Well, today the Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary has issued this report. Forces future efficiency must improve to meet financial pressures, because apparently all the forces are under extreme financial pressure at the moment as a result of austerity, or is that mismanagement, or is it both? So Mike Cunningham of HMIC was on the Today programme on Radio 4 this morning discussing this. Now, the report says that even efficient forces could approach a state of, quotes, uncertain sustainability. And there we go with that word again, sustainability. It's appearing everywhere these days, isn't it? He said, well, shall we say that, as we warned several months ago, aside from outsourcing police functions, as is happening in Plymouth City Council at the moment, and alongside the 500 job losses in Devon and Cornwall, HMIC report is suggesting that forced mergers are very much on the cards, just as we said they would be, because this, of course, is in order to make forces much more sustainable, and it's also to mirror what has been happening in Scotland. Now, the HMIC report said that forces were planning to reduce spending by 15% by 2018 and to get rid of at least 12,000 jobs, including 7,400 officers and 1,300 community support officers. Mr. Cunningham said policing in 5 years' time is likely to look very different to now, and so on. And he said maintaining visible neighbourhood policing rather than becoming mainly a reactive service is likely to be a challenge, and the public will need reassurance if policing becomes less visible. And he said police forces have been through change on an unprecedented scale since 2010, and the next 5 years will be more challenging for forces as they strive to make further reductions in budgets and workforce while dealing with increasingly complex crime. Police is entering uncharted waters. Now, of course, Theresa May had something to say about this as well. She said that police reform was working, in quotes, and she said, however, if we want policing in this country to be the best it can be, then police forces must better understand their demand, develop more and deeper collaboration. So there we go with the multi-agency approach again, and do more to prevent crime before it happens. So we're looking at future crime there. And the report also shows, she said, as HMIC has long said, that what matters is not how many officers you have, but how they're deployed. So there you go. But at the end of the day, we are looking at increasing outsourcing / privatisation and the merger of forces.
and in comes privatisation with a vengeance. Guy, I'd just give you 30 seconds on that one. You've had quite a lot of dealings with the police. What's your thought about police cuts?
Well, police is G4S, here we come, which is what I'm saying to the police that I'm engaging virtually every day. That's where we're going with that. And I mean, what Mike was saying, where it says about complex crime, trying to report a crime nowadays is complex. They tell us it's civil, and they're being transformed into this corporate entity. G4S is at the head of all this, and this is where we're seeing where they're all going to be going. And that's the future of policing at the moment.
If we let it happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, I think you're looking for volunteers.
Right. So this is an event happening at the London School of Economics, or at least being promoted by the London School of Economics tomorrow. And I'd very much like somebody to go along to this and report back to us if we can. It's being held in the Sheikh Zayed Theatre, the new academic building, and the speaker is going to be Lord Turner, and the chairman is going to be Robert Peston. And this is Between Debt and the Devil, Money, Credit and Fixing Global Finance. If you have a look, have a search for that, and if anybody can get along to that and give us a report, maybe ask a couple of suitable questions, then that would be great. So, but let us know if you're going.
Those would be Bradbury-based questions, preferably, at least one of them.
Yes, indeed.
And I think anybody who goes could probably be in for a UK column medal to sit in a meeting chaired by Robert Peston. I think takes some courage. So if you've got that courage, please go along. Well, if Prince Willie is busy playing with very tall basketball stars in China, of course, what we're not hearing about is what's been going on in Syria. And thank you very much to the person who sent in this Veterans Today report, which has got a particularly interesting angle on attacks which are being carried out by the US Air Force at the moment. So in this report, it says last week, 2 American F-16s attacked the city of Aleppo in Syria, 2.5 million people, and one of the oldest inhabited cities on Earth. Russia's President Putin called the attack strange and questioned America's motives. In the aftermath of the attack, the reasoning behind the seemingly bizarre assault has become clear. America is trying to bring down the Assad government using germ warfare. Now, this little paragraph is deceptive because actually this is much more believable than thinking there's some international germ warfare scam going on here. US warplanes target Aleppo's largest power plant, follows attacks on 2 other power plants in areas east of Aleppo. Attacks have also been targeted at water chlorination facilities. And what this article is really saying is that it's remarkable that these American attacks are clearly designed to undermine the health of the civilian population. So they're cutting electrical supplies, but they are also reducing the ability of the Syrians to chlorinate their water, and that means that they are open to diseases such as cholera, which of course spread remarkably quickly. So the germ warfare that the article is really talking about is deliberate creation of conditions necessary to allow cholera and other such diseases to spread. I think there's some merit in this article. Encourage people to go and have a read of it. But isn't it remarkable that it's gone totally quiet on Syria ever since President Putin decided to get in and sort out those bad terrorists? Which ones are they, Mike? I get confused on whether they're good terrorists or bad terrorists at the moment.
Well, there are both, of course. But the thing that struck me about was the parallels to what happened in Libya. Of course, destroy the infrastructure, and that really destroys the country.
Yes.
And it's like an act of vengeance here. It's not. It's an act of spite. Putin's gone in to sort this problem out of ISIS, and as an act of spite, they're just going to demolish as much as they can of the real underlying infrastructure.
Indeed. Well, one of the things which we might expect to see is Russia using some of the surface-to-air missiles that have been put in. And Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire has got a particularly interesting article on that if you'd like to go and have a look. But who would believe that massive American armed forces have had to come begging to the British to borrow equipment. But this is what the Telegraph would have us believe. It says that the US Army has been forced to borrow British helicopters amid budget cuts. Reduced American presence in Europe forces the US to borrow equipment from NATO allies. And an American general has said this: the mission in Europe is still the same. We've just got to figure out how you make 30,000 American troops feel like 300,000. So we've got bizarre things going on here. Everybody accusing President Putin of being on the war path. He's going to invade Eastern Europe with massive forces. And yet the Americans haven't got any forces in Europe. Britain no longer has viable armed forces. What's it all about? Well, in the article, of course, we get a hint. The demands on the US Army in Europe have not decreased. Growing Russian aggression, there's the nudge, in particular, has posed challenges that the US has been forced to prepare for with fewer troops and less equipment. Growing Russian aggression. So let's have a look at this article, see how it works, because what the Telegraph is doing is spinning the news to promote a false political agenda in Europe, and that agenda is the need for a European army. So if you go into the article, you will find an embedded video which is all about Russia's tremendous military arsenal in 90 seconds. We just took a couple of screenshots. 750,000 ground troops, of course, makes a complete nonsense out of the British Army forces in Eastern Europe at the moment. Massive amounts of tanks, 15,000, 6,000 self-propelled guns. So this little video designed to ramp up the fear. And then once we've got the British public to fear the large aggressive Russian armed forces, the solution is placed in front of people, and that's the need for the European army. So a brilliant piece of applied psychology by the Telegraph. What else can we have a look at with this? Well, here's the article. We've got this angle as well. We've got David Cameron absolutely cutting Britain's military capability. The Army, the Air Force, the Navy at the moment are in their weakest that they have been for many, many years, all on the basis of, or the lie that there's no money. But as you cut British armed forces, you ramp up Russia as the aggressive enemy. Now, it's taken Russia today to point out that this bizarre agenda is confusing our own politicians. So we've got Conservative MP John Barron here warning against a political disconnect between defence commitment and funding, which is not being recognised across the political divide. This is what we're hearing from senior people close to the higher levels of the armed forces, that senior military officers are now getting confused as to what the government is actually up to. Then we've got this angle here, the US coming in and warning that the UK must keep its 2% budget for NATO. What's Cameron up to? Well, of course, Cameron stands on the world stage, creates the wars, and ultimately it's US military personnel being killed and maimed. So Cameron knows what his policy is, but it appears at the moment that the British military don't. They need to wake up. This is treason, and this policy is going to go on for as long or until we can actually expose to the wider public what's happening. All based, of course, on the lie there's no money. And while the military are collapsed, Mike, you've been having a look at steel.
Yes, because it's now confirmed 1,200 jobs to go at TaTa, and that's on top of the 2,200 jobs lost as a week of SSI going on, as a result of SSI going under. And if we just, so it's also not, it's also been confirmed that Comparo Industries has put some sections of its business into administration. Administrators have been appointed to 16 out of 20 companies within the Comparo group, and PricewaterhouseCoopers has been appointed as the administrators. They have said that 1,700 or 1,800 employees would be briefed on the impact of administration. They're saying that staff are attending work as normal. Yeah, big deal. So basically what we're looking at here is about 5,000 jobs lost potentially in 2 weeks. And that's 20% or so of the current workforce that's still working in steel. and even more, actually, as the Mirror suggests here, it could be 15,000 facing the sack. But of course, China is getting the blame for this. But let's remember that it all began with the Lima Declaration, exporting jobs to low-wage economies. And the full title of the Lima Declaration was the Lima Declaration and Plan of Action on Industrial Development and Cooperation. This was a treaty that was signed in 1975 as a convention of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, signed in Lima, that's the name. It's an international agreement to wind down national manufacturing in developed countries and transfer that manufacturing capability to developing nations. And of course, linked with this is the whole idea of interdependence. And of course, interdependence, well, that's a newspeak term coined by the Club of Rome. And according to them, we face a set of interlocking global problems such as overpopulation, food shortages, non-renewable resource depletion, environmental degradation, and so on. And of course, they're using exponentially based computer models to decide all these things, just as we are with global warming, for example. We'll come on to that in a minute. Of course, the only solution capable of preventing a global catastrophe, according to the Club of Rome, is the development of an organic society. Now, although it's frequently denied, it should be obvious that any idea of interdependence and independence are mutually exclusive. So what we're saying here is the end, with the steel situation, is the end of a 40-year plan to asset strip nations right around the world and to destroy productive economies and replace productivity with a demand for plastic rubbish like this. And instead of dreaming of, developing nations or flying to the stars or whatever it is that might have inspired children in the 1960s and 1970s, instead we're dreaming of the next Apple keynote speech and how soon it is we'll be able to join the next herd of people queuing outside the Apple store. So it's not China's fault that this has happened, it's ours. We elected these politicians that have done this to us, and so that's perhaps where we should start looking.
Well, what a wonderful cue, Mike. Let's have a look at some of the politicians, because the Mail has been reporting on Tory MP Geofrey Cox has resigned from the Standards Committee. Let's have a look at him. Well, he looks pretty happy and well fed, as you'd expect, because he picked up an extra £325,000 in earnings as a barrister alongside his earnings as an MP. But oh dear, he failed to declare those, and he just happened to be on the Standards Committee. So he thought he better stand down from the committee. That's usually what you do when there's a pack of trouble coming. Or is it? Because here she is, Parliamentary Standards Commissioner Catherine Hudson has said she's looking into the case. So what do we expect to happen? Absolutely nothing. Sheer hypocrisy by these people. You stand on a committee for standards, but you don't have any yourself. Let's put that in another context. We're going to label it sheer hypocrisy and dual standards in Parliament. There's Mr. Cox. Remember what's going on with him. But let's remember this gentleman, Bernard Jenkin, MP, the chair of the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, that has been absolutely hammering Kids Company. So this is what you get on the parliamentary website. And they're saying serious questions have been raised about the financial management and leadership of Kids Company and the degree of sustained and substantial financial support that the government's given. So this is a really grueling interrogation. They're not interested in the children or the abuse of the children. All they're interested in is the money, following Camilla's exposure of the RAINS SRA, Satanic Ritual Abuse list. But this man sits on the committee, chairs it, and he was pretty brutal in his questioning of Camilla. And we now see Alan Yentob also coming under the spotlight to do with Kids Company. Nobody asking about the RAINS list or the abuse of the children. So Mr. Jenkins sits in judgment, but we're going to remind people, of course, this is the same man who, oh dear, made a little bit of an error in claiming expenses which categorically he wasn't permitted to take under the rules then back into 2006. Sheer hypocrisy. So no wonder we can't trust these people on any other matters. We asked for an explanation as to how he could be chairman of the Public Administration Select Committee and judging on the financial acumen and due diligence of Kids Company when he'd personally been forced to repay the bulk of £63,000. Well, what reply did we get? Of course, we got the normal response. I'm afraid that I'm unable to supply you with a press statement. And I think that's because of rank hypocrisy. These people are in our faces, Guy. It's obvious, isn't it?
It's well obvious, Brian. And all these regulatory bodies, they're all gatekeepers. And that's all they are, really, is gatekeepers for the establishment. They wouldn't be there if they weren't. We're dealing on a regular basis with ombudsmen. And funny enough, you said the SRA. Well, I thought you were talking about the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. But of course, you're talking about satanic ritual abuse, which probably amounts to the same thing, really. The hypocrisy runs rife, and the mainstream media aren't able to keep it under wraps anymore because everything they produce turns out to be hypocritical. And so, we just got to keep on plugging away at these people.
Of course. And it's not only British politicians we've got to watch for a pack of lies, but of course, it's also American politicians.
Because we mentioned this a few days ago as well. This is Al Gore training an army of organisers to spread climate gospel. Now, of course, we've got this big climate meeting, the successor to Rio, taking place in Paris beginning on the 30th of November. And the rhetoric is really ramping up for it, and the stuff in the news is really ramping up for it. Really, the modern rhetoric began with the encyclical from the Pope, and that from that point we have seen this build. So we highlighted Al Gore training his army of community organisers to spread the climate gospel. But if we move on to the next one, we now have the Foreign Policy magazine here pointing out that the White House now has 81 companies backing its climate change pledge. This is companies such as General Motors, Best Buy, Bank of America, Google, Walmart, Nike, IKEA, and so on. 81 companies. You won't find any hydrocarbons companies on there, of course, but nonetheless, so the propaganda and the momentum builds a little bit. And here in the UK, we have the Global Apollo Programme, and they're rather ironically, perhaps, using the word Apollo as a sort of reminder of Kennedy's campaign to try and get men on the moon. We can have that conversation some other time. But this Global Apollo program to combat climate change, and who's behind this? David King, Lord John Brown, Richard Layard, Gus O'Donnell, Martin Rees, Nicholas Stern, and Adair Turner, who's the speaker at this event that I'd like somebody to go to at the LSE tomorrow. This is a group of policy leaders from the United Kingdom who they say have initiated the Global Apollo Programme to combat climate change. The program is named after the NASA moon mission. It's built on the idea of directed technological change. That is backed by public funds. Now, their proposals are, with a really focused 10-year program of R&D beginning in 2016, it should be possible to discover the disruptive new technologies which can help clean energy on a massive scale before it's too late. And they talk about targeting, scale. They talk about a roadmap committee. They say that the committee of some 20 senior technologists and businessmen will construct and revise a roadmap year by year. It'll be co-located with the International Energy Agency in Paris, but will, of course, include very many countries not belonging to the IEA. All results discovered through the program will be made publicly available. So what they say is that this is as the landmark, what they're calling the landmark climate change conference in Paris comes along, that they will attempt to build a smart grid. It's all smart technology. It's all sustainability. It's the usual rhetoric. But then earlier on today, France 24 had an interview with the World Bank president, Jim Yong Kim. And he said, we know that there's a cost to putting carbon in the air, and that can be translated directly into human lives. For example, carbon-based pollution takes the lives of millions of people every year. He said, but we haven't been incorporating this cost in the way we do business, through taxes, through fees, through trading schemes. We simply want the actual cost of putting carbon in the air to be reflected in everything we do. And of course, who is sitting there in the wings ready to profit from these trading schemes that the World Bank is calling for? None other than David Blood and Al Gore. So we come right back to the beginning of this little piece with the same person. One thing's for sure, I think, despite all the pressure to do so, the Paris conference will close without any agreement from China on whatever they intend to do to increase our sustainability.
Mike, thanks for that. Guy, a very quick last-minute comment on the subject of climate change, if you'd like.
Well, do we believe it? You know, I don't know. I don't know what I know anymore, Brian. We've been pumped so full of propaganda over the years. I think that the truth is a very hard thing to find with these people. As for the Robert Peston thing, going back to it, I'll if you tell me where it is, I'll try and find someone to go down there. But it's called Debt and the Devil. Let's remember that debt is the devil, as far as most people are concerned. So that's all I can say about that. But I mean, as for the Al Gore situation and all the climate change, you know, God only knows what the truth is.
Well, the tangled web is of course the technique of the devil, isn't it? To make it so confusing we can't actually see what's happening. But we'll continue to work to unpick it. But we'll just leave you with this thought that, of course, what politicians would like is for you to keep voting for them. We want you to keep voting for the same corrupt politicians and, of course, those who are protecting paedophiles. Thank you very much to the person who sent this through from Trafford. This has been appearing through people's doors. Looks very officious, urgent reminder. The way you register to vote is changing. And as with most stuff from the government these days, you turn it over and you can see the threats. If you're not on the register, you cannot vote at any elections. It may also harm your credit score, affecting your ability to get a mortgage, loan, mobile phone contract, and other credit facilities. So they want our data. They're going to share it with the credit rating agencies anyway, so that's helping them a lot. And you should be afraid of any repercussions if you fail to register. Fear and threats in order to get corrupt politicians in force. Well, that's our news for today. Guy, thank you very much for joining us and giving us an update. We'll have you back soon. Mike, any closing comments? No? Okay, that's it for today. Thank you to everybody who watches UK Column or listens to us. If you haven't become a subscriber, please consider doing that or make a donation if you can. We'd like to keep going. We'd like to expand, and we can only do that with your help. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.